I'm delighted to say that joining me in the studio is Middle East policy analyst Janatan Sayeh, who understands this subject in a lot more depth than I do. Janatan, great to see you.
Hi, great to be with you.
Great to see you. Now, what did you make of Trump's warning, the shot across the bows in the speech last night? Iran will have been watching and listening to that.
They certainly were, and it was a very significant moment because the president laid out three main pillars that have been historically used to really explain why America were to get involved in different areas. So, of course, we first talked about the nuclear aspect. The talks about weaponization was key. This is something that Tehran has been very adamant about, moving with not only enrichment, but with aims to weaponize that. So that's very critical. Yeah. And, of course, second to that, you have the ballistic missile angle that, as the president noted, is not only threatening mainland Europe, but if they were to pursue ICBMs, it could actually target the United States, similar to North Korea. And third, which is the most important pillar, is the repression angle. So for the president to actually acknowledge that 32,000 Iranians have been killed in the streets that were unarmed protesters fighting against an Islamic regime there, so that again, it really reminds us of the Balkan Wars, where the United States had to get involved because of the tragedy, really the scale of the mass killing of civilians.
Are you surprised that he hasn't gone in yet?
To an extent, yes and no. I think it's important for Washington to exhaust all diplomatic options. It's important for us to show the world that the ball has been in Tehran's court for years now. It's really significant to demonstrate that they have never negotiated in good faith. We looked at the Obama deal. Of course, that benefited them greatly, and they were able to enrich in undeclared sites. Right now, they have not really backtracked the rhetoric about enrichment capacity. As we know, it's the first step for weaponization. So I know Tehran has been trying to buy time, but at the same time, that has given us an opportunity to develop our fleet in the region. Of course, we've moved in more fighter jets to the Middle East as well. So that, again, the posturing is significant, and of course, Tehran has not provided any concession so far.
What do you think happens next? Trump said last night about he wants the diplomacy to work. They have to exhaust diplomacy. If 0 is no diplomacy and 100 is, yep, we've exhausted it, where are we at now?
We're getting close towards the end.
100.
We are getting close to 100. Because, again, this has been Tehran's strategy to stall, trying to deter. But what's really interesting, I think, to all of us analysts, is that they have not learned from their mistakes. They deployed the same strategy in June 2025, and that led to the 12-day war. So it's really interesting to see Tehran, again, going back to that. Realistically, they don't have many options either. Of course, they're trying to come up with new proposals. We've heard them try to appease the American public by trying to provide more financial incentives. But again, Washington has stood firm and has redlined that it's really about preventing weaponization. And of course, this regime, you have to look at it from two angles. One is capability, the other one's intent. Of course, you can bomb the capabilities, but the intent can only be eradicated if you move with regime change.
Is that possible?
Of course it is. In the context of Tehran today especially, it is, because you have to look at this ongoing momentum on the ground that has not died despite all the mass killing. So you see more and more protesters. You see student activists. Iran is a very young country, population of 90 million. And when you look at some of these universities, university students have been actually protesting for about a week now at this point. And these are the same institutions that their fathers' generations were getting radicalized by Islamism, Marxism, and the same generation that 40, 50 years ago was at one point anti-Shah. Their children are now increasingly pro-Pahlavi, pro-America. So of course, this is not, you should not look at America through the Cold War lens. This is really a new wave. And of course, I think talking about the society and of course talking about the implications of regime change, it would greatly benefit not only the Middle East, but really the globe as a whole.
Yeah, and do you feel you've got a clear picture of what life is like on the ground at the moment for Iranian people?
I can tell you, of course, the country is grieving. You know, as we talked about, that scale of killing means any Iranian at this point knows somebody who's unfortunately passed, myself included. It is quite the tragedy. But again, I think what's been really resilient about the Iranian public is that they were able to translate this grieving into action, into anger. So the momentum is still there. But of course, nothing is going back to normal. Schools are not really functioning. Universities are not really back to normal. As we said, the economy is still crumbling. So strikes are happening throughout the country. To them, there is no way out but through, and of course they're just waiting for intervention so they can actually operate as the boots on the ground and push this regime towards its collapse.
We saw with Venezuela how when America wants to remove somebody, boy can they do it. Could they do something similar in Iran, or is it just not the same? It's too complex, there's too much security in that country.
This is not to say it's not doable, but it is more complex. So in the Venezuela context, it was more similar to what we saw with Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein. You had one entity, one person really, that was leading the entire regime. In the Islamic Republic, of course, you're talking about parallel institutions. But of course, the dynamics at the Islamic Republic are more complex, but that also means the Iranian population is also familiar with how they can address this threat. Being the first victims of this regime, they've been able to develop a strategy on a hyper-local level. And it really goes back to how the opposition has been leading this, led by the Crown Prince Pahlavi, of course, with a great network throughout the country. And you're not just talking about Tehran, you're not just talking about one sector of society, men, women of all ages, of all different ethnicities and linguistic backgrounds, increasingly coming together and having a developed idea as to how they can go about really pushing this regime towards its collapse.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Janatan. Janatan Sayeh, their Middle East policy analyst. We will be watching that situation incredibly closely here on The Late Show Live.